Liberals planning another carbon tax hike. Now, this brings the carbon tax up to like 61 cents a liter on fuel, even though we've not seen a reduction in temperature and there's been no sort of positive emissions reduction from the first one. Well, this time it's going to be different. Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, many families, especially those who live in rural communities, have to drive out of necessity. They drive to school, to work, to medical appointments, to social activities. Families are already struggling with higher cost of living expenses. Now this Liberal government wants to add 2 more carbon taxes on financially stressed Canadians. The Liberal carbon tax 1 will add 41 cents a litre on gas. How painful does life have to get before this Prime Minister will finally cancel the carbon tax?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Conservatives never want to talk about the costs of climate change. The Parliamentary Budget Officer reported that there was a $20 billion impact to the Canadian economy in 2021, Mr. Speaker. 600 fires are burning from coast to coast to coast, Mr. Speaker. They're devastating our communities. They're threatening lives and livelihoods. When are the Conservatives going to get serious about climate change and stop the denial, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Member for Haldimand Norfolk.
Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you about the cost of this carbon tax. It costs lower income Canadians the most. It is an unfair tax. Carbon tax 2 comes at a time when many Canadians are struggling just to feed themselves. Now, every time a Canadian fills up their car, they will be paying an additional tax on the GST and the HST. This Prime Minister is literally putting a carbon tax on a tax. When will this Prime Minister take his boot off the neck of Canadians and finally cancel carbon tax 1 and 2?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Conservatives have no credibility when it comes to affordability, Mr. Speaker. Every time we put an affordability measure on the table, dental, rental, the Canada Child Benefit, what do? They vote against it. And the climate rebate, Mr. Speaker, is an affordability measure. It's going to help families be better off. But you know what's not going to leave families better off, Mr. Speaker? It's investing in cryptocurrency, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition hasn't walked back his comments. He hasn't apologized, Mr. Speaker, and that's because he has no plan for the environment, no plan for the economy, and certainly no plan for affordability.
I think if you actually believe that, that not doing a carbon tax does not help the environment in any way, shape, or form. It's a wealth redistribution scheme where the government ends up pocketing more money and they give it to their friends. It does not help the environment. It's literally insane tinfoil nonsense. And I don't know how that guy says it with a straight face. He cannot believe it, that it costs $20 billion a year, and it would if we weren't implementing this carbon tax. Furthermore, it is insane to blame a sort of chartable temperature increase, like not chartable, for the fires that happen and have been happening in summers forever. It's wild to see that you're picking a time where there happens to be a little bit more fires than usual to score political points. I just think that's so repugnant. And people are suffering, people are struggling. This is the opposite of leadership, and it's dead on there, the boot on the neck. They really don't care about your average Joes. They don't care about people. They just care about pushing their narratives. Help the environment, do good things for the environment. A carbon tax doesn't do it at all, period.
Yeah, but Adam, if you disagree with me, we're going to lose $50 billion.
Yeah,
how could you disagree with that? You're wrong.
Yeah, true.
That's what he said. That's all he said at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And you talk about the wildfires. Like, there's actual plant life and trees that need the heat of wildfires in order to seed, to produce their ancestral, lineage in the plant sense. If you have zero wildfires whatsoever, then you're going to have certain trees and certain plants that go extinct. And not only that, but control burns are actually a large, a very common practice. And that, in Banff, we saw one incident where there was some kind of, a gender-focused training session where they had a bunch of, diversity protocols, and that wildfire in Banff was started because they were trying to do control fires. But control fires are generally a common practice every year that has to be done to mitigate the effects of larger wildfires or wildfires that are going to hit certain areas. And to say, you know, oh, wildfire bad, oh, hail bad, right? Oh, there's going to be a hurricane. Oh, every single day the weather changes. And every single day, so long as it changes, they're going to say that the change is bad. And it's a cycle for them that they can just feed off of forever, because when it's too hot, they can, you know, say it's global warming. When it's too cold, they can say it's global warming. I mean, maybe they have to, you know, do those 20 years apart so people don't catch on too quick. But at the end of the day, they just keep rinsing and recycling the same arguments.
10 years to save 20 years, 2030, 2055. It's been like that since the 80s. It was George Washington Sr. George Washington Sr. prompted this whole global warming terminology, and they've just been cycling it as a key election thing. And it's because for most people, so much of this is just superficial language. Yes, help the environment. The money helps the environment. People are like, good. I'm willing to help the environment. The critical thought is no longer there. So we do our best to elucidate people. I really quickly do want to touch on, and this is just another symptom of the entitlement. Trudeau and the Liberal government do not work for the people. It's clear that people do not want more taxes, but they just insist on it. They're all ideologically driven. And then this next story, and it's Andrew Scheer, this video. Justin Trudeau's hand-picked rapporteur says that he works for the government, not Parliament, and not for Canadians. Well, sorry to break it to you, and I know this isn't the case under Justin Trudeau, but the government is supposed to work for the people. And when you're hired by the government to investigate something, you, by extension, are working for the people. Let's jump to this clip of Andrew Scheer.
Mr. Speaker, in response to yesterday's vote where MPs representing a clear majority of Canadians voted for him to step aside, Rapporteur David Johnston said he isn't going anywhere. In fact, he said he doesn't work for Parliament or Canadians. He said he works for the government. That's the problem, Mr. Speaker. He works for the same Liberal government that benefited from Beijing's election interference, and he personally serves the Prime Minister who chose to do nothing while Chinese Canadians were bullied into voting for his Liberal Party. Right. Nobody is fooled by this sham of a process. So when will the Prime Minister fire his ski buddy and call a public inquiry?
The Honourable Minister for Emergency Preparedness.
I'm reminded once again that it's not only unfair but deeply offensive to listen to the member opposite question Mr. Johnson's allegiance to this country. His 50-year career in public service has made it crystal clear to everyone that his loyalty is to Canada. And Mr. Speaker, as I also said, and as I quote former Prime Minister Harper, Mr. Johnson represents hard work, dedication, public service, and humility. Mr. Speaker, Canada is blessed to have a man so dedicated to public service, persevering through this healthy.
Member for Regina Capel.
Canada is cursed by a Prime Minister who tarnished that man's reputation by involving him in this scandal. The Prime Minister can't be the one to decide how to investigate this scandal because he benefited from it. And David Johnston can't decide either because he's a family friend and a longtime member of the Trudeau Foundation. And Frank Iacobucci can't be the one to sign off on David Johnston's role because he's part of the Trudeau Foundation as well. Conflict of interest, conflict of interest, conflict of interest. Why is it that whenever the best interests of Canadians conflict with the political interests of the Prime Minister always chooses himself?
The Honourable Minister for Emergency Preparedness.
Mr. Speaker, protecting Canada from nefarious hostile activities of foreign state actors like China is a priority for our government. We have taken significant action to protect the integrity of Canadian institutions and in particular our democracy. We recognize that there is more work to do and we all have a responsibility to stand up and protect our democracy. I would invite all members to cease their attacks on some of the finest Canadians I know and to unite in this important work.
No criticism of Trudeau. Yeah, I am hopeful because you see conservatives are starting to actually be like, this is ridiculous. For the longest time, conservatives were trying not to lose elections. We see a little bit of that throughout campaigns, obviously, because the media is so hostile and attacky. But the strongest moments for Andrew Scheer, for Pierre Poilievre, for Danielle Smith, for Scott Moe, when Scott Moe had that line about, like, if this is what you're going to do, lock me up, like, come lock me up. Conservatives who are brash and willing to push back and willing to speak their heart and not just play politics, not just be on the back pedal perpetually. It's incredible to see. And it's that's going to win people's hearts over, I hope. the willingness to speak from the heart, to be blunt, to be direct, and to call out the absurd status of politics within this country right now.
That's a clip from something we call Rebel News Daily. It's our daily live stream hosted by my friend David Menzies, but the show also includes a rotating cast of hosts and special guests, including me. It's a great way for us to talk about the news of the day as the news is happening in an unscripted fashion, and it's an awesome way for you to interact with us as well. We stream every weekday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Mountain, wherever you find Rebel News. See you there.